Hey, Leighton Croft here. It's Saturday, March the 6th, 2021. I'm here again with our strategic advisor, Dr. Laurie Curtis. Good morning, Laurie. How are you doing?
Great to be here.
Well, this video is designed more for the technical person. And so we're going to go through some slides. These are from our corporate presentation. And we put out a video on March the 4th, a longer video with Laurie. And this is going to build on that. So we're going to kind of drill down, if you will, on some of the more technical issues regarding our flagship Brewer Gold Project and regarding the very exciting initial partial drill results that we reported earlier last week. So let's get into it, Laurie. Here we've got a regional view. What's important here from a technical perspective?
Well, first of all, the Carolina Slate Belt, which is the unit largely, well, it's the whole collection there, but unit in red that we're in particularly focused on has a very high-end gold endowment, as you can see, including at least 4 mines. And the first important thing I note, which won't be evident from the slide, is that Brewer, Haile, and Barite Hill have all been dated as very specifically what we call Eocambrian at 550 million years. That's significant to me because it means whatever gold event occurred, it occurred over a distance of 200 kilometers at the same time, as you can see from that scale.
You've mentioned to me that you can think of these as being sort of born or created at the same time, not unlike, twins. And so that's significant, particularly with the Haile and Brewer relationship.
That is correct, because they're probably part of the same system, one proximal being Brewer to the heat source and the other distal being Haile. The only other comment I'd make is that this was a mobile belt that was compressed from the southeast, and that suture, if you will, extends all the way up through the Slate Belt to Newfoundland, and frankly, even goes beyond that all the way to Ireland. So it's a major feature that probably allowed these fluids to enter the Slate Belt in this particular case at around 550 million years. So here's the standard model. People will recognize this who have been involved in our business, and it's been an evolving model over 20, 30 years. But the first thing that hits you, of course, is the red. The red and yellow, basically the base is a porphyry system that you're outlining there, which is the engine heat driver. And these channeled fluids, being the streaming breccia zones that move to surface over several kilometers, are the targets for what we call high sulfidation systems. You'll notice that there are steam vents in the surface because what's going on here is these fluids, as they move up from the porphyries, have a pressure release as they approach surface. The lithostatic pressure is not as great, and of course that creates a gas phase, which eventually results in explosive activity and fumarolic activity, which blasts the hydrothermal plume from the base of that heat engine to the surface and results in what we see at Brewer being a very leached lithocap in which the mineralization is hosted. The important thing is peripheral, up to 8 kilometers away, where we have the word Haile. These fluids often mix with cooler meteoric fluids and form what we call a low sulfidation style of deposit. At Haile, which we've been to Leighton, of course it's very structurally controlled, but it has evidence of a low sulfidation fluid as well. We're not experts on Haile, but we note that also on our Jefferson property, which surrounds Brewer, which you've staked, there's been similar recognition of Haile-style mineralization in the sediments, which we drilled a couple of years ago. The important thing here is the drill holes that we've talked about today are the focal point on the high sulfidation, and they may well be 0.5 to 1 kilometer deep, and they're very similar to other systems that I've identified or seen around the world. So in this slide, we've got an aerial view on the left of the Brewer. It's about a square kilometer in that photograph. And the cross-section AA- is looking east in this case. And we've got chargeability anomalies, which we're still trying to understand, but certainly create drill targets and potential heat engines. We would also expect these to be resistivity anomalies, given the amount of silicification we've seen in drill core. And there are a couple of historic drill holes that we had evidence from previous placer work, but frankly, not a lot of data to work with historically in terms of drilling. Plus the core is in fact not in such great shape. So we weren't able to do a bunch of metallurgy. We weren't able to really get structural data out of it.
On that point, What can you say about what we do know about some of the work that was done in the past on the metallurgy?
As you and I know, the company who had this previously was solely focused on the oxide, and they, in fact, just stacked the sulfide to one side. My understanding is that there was not really an attempt to recover gold from the sulfides. And unfortunately, although the petrology, and now we know from our current drill core, suggests there's both free gold and gold associated with copper, we still need to do a fair bit of bench testing. But most of these high sulfidation systems globally, particularly if they're not associated with carbonaceous sediments, such as the one I've seen in Dominican Republic, Pueblo Viejo, if they don't have a carbonaceous capture, similar to the Nevada-style deposits, these deposits don't pose enormous recovery issues. But right now it's a blank wall. That's the truth, and we're going to be doing a lot of work on the metallurgy and petrology from the fresh core that we have now.
But what I hear you saying also is that there is clearly a distinction between what we have at Brewer and what you may see more commonly in Nevada in terms of the carbon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sediment.
Yeah, there's no carbonaceous material here, nothing that would bring up the refractory word to my knowledge in this system. Now, this is a real gift which we got from a couple of days ago, which surprised us all, but it was thanks to your foresight that we have 35,000 data points from blast holes, which were entered into a computer database. And what you're seeing here is the composited version of that for the 480 bench, 480 meaning feet. And I would say that this is somewhere between 25 and 40 meters in the old pit deep. And what is significant is the concentration of green, yellow, and red. And particularly, you can also see that there's starting to be a northwest trend, at least in the north of the pit and the middle of the pit, and what looks like an east-west trend or something different going on in the south. Composited level plans that I've just scanned at briefly suggest that, yes, there's a northwest. You can put the pointer in the middle there, south of hole 4. Yes, that trend there is northwest through there and to the south of there, that long line. Yep, that one. That's a northwesterly trend, and it sits in all the level sections, so it's almost vertical. Whereas the one to the north, that trend going up to the northwest pit, that one migrates to the northeast, so as it goes deeper. So that's suggesting that northwest dominant structure is actually northeast trending. This is great information, and you'll notice that the two holes that were collared 110 meters apart, 4 and 5, are actually 4 on this level is in a fairly dull part of that diagram in terms of concentration, whereas hole 5 is closer to mineralization identified in the pit about 20 meters above where we started coring. The only other thing I note is that peripheral portion of these pits have up to greater than 10 gram holes, blast holes in, you can see them to the southeast of the rim there, and you can see them up in the northwest terminus of the yes, up in that area. So this all bodes well. You can also see concentrations of them that you're outlining. So they clearly had a tiger by the tail, even though they produced only 200,000 ounces. They just weren't willing to expand and explore, and you know the history there. So this is the coup de grace. This is the section A-A looking west this time. First, what I see is the pit is 300 meters long in this longitudinal. In fact, you could expand it to 500 meters depending how you took that longitudinal. And it's about 100 to 300 meters wide. And the staggering thing is, based on that database, these two holes intersected 2 to 3 times the total thickness of the oxide zone in 2 random holes drilled below, which really is some of the best early drilling results that I would have seen. Despite the fact that it's a brownfields project, no one would have expected to see that. Now, we know they don't translate into true thicknesses. We're not sure what the true thickness is, but clearly, knowing that this is a breccia pipe, a funnel, if you will, this bodes well for dimension and ultimately in terms of the total number of ounces or equivalent ounces we'll get. As you look to the right of each hole, you get composites that we announced in hole 5. The maiden number there, 181 meters of 1.24. We still don't know what the copper values will be, whether they will add to that number, but Patrick and the team have identified copper minerals within that core. specifically anorite and several other entities that have been found there. So that bodes well. You can see that there's a lot of the core is anomalous, almost to the base. Anomalous being defined as greater than 50 ppb, or for those who are not familiar, 1,000 ppb to a gram, so 0.05 grams. But our cutoff here, as far as I'm concerned, is the green. And there's plenty of green in that profile, both profiles, followed by yellow, followed by red. The other thing that's significant, of course, is the pink. The pink on the top of 5 is the 3 meters of 24 grams, and that coincided with identification of visible gold. Of course, the gold has, we think, based on Chris's work, Chris Capps may have some tellurium in it, but it's VG, and it was identified 5 times or 5 observations in the drill core. On the left side, the higher grade is in hole 4, is more towards the base, and that's also heartening because it shows that that mineral is also almost 100 meters below the pit level.
Just to clarify, this figure does not show it, but hole 4 did go a total vertical depth of almost 600 meters. And so here we're seeing kind of in this area getting down to just about 200 meters. But we did, as you said, see anomalous gold until the very bottom.
Thanks, Leighton. Good point.
You mentioned copper minerals like inorgite and some others. What about the association, if any, to our knowledge, of arsenic with copper?
Well, there is arsenic in all these systems. It's a worldwide association because of the sulfur salts that the copper combines with and the sulfur activity. There is an association. Undoubtedly, there's going to be arsenic in the system, as we know from the leachate. But what I've been told by the geologists who are logging it is that from the brief geochem that we have, the multi-element, there's more an association of gold with copper than there is gold with arsenic. But no doubt arsenic will be in the system. It's something we'll have to deal with in a concentrate. But once again, it's not a concern. It's typical of these kind of systems. And frankly, the tenor of the arsenic that I've seen in the holes to date is not that great, which supports the fact that there may likely be more association of copper and gold than there will be in the sulfur salts. So this is a brilliant slide created on the run by Patrick, and it shows the composited drill data from the early work that was done. These are so the colored version on or areas on top. You're looking west here. These are the holes that are drilled at each level prior to blasting. They're called blast holes, and very strong northwest structure. You're looking along it there. You can see almost the dip to the east in that northern terminus. And what is interesting, which we're excited about clearly, is or it heads in the direction of the northwest pit, where if you'd been to the northwest pit with some of the historic geos, they said that some of the strongest porphyry and topaz was encountered. That suggests to me that there's another satellite, or that this trend maybe across a break or something continues there and possibly beyond. You can see also hole 4 was collared in a deeper portion of the oxide zone, because you see the blast holes come right to the core there, to where we started below the fill, and the trace below for another 70 meters of 1.25. And on the right hole, who would have thought that in the sea of blue there, that you would have had another 180 meters of mineralization below that. A phenomenal outcome given these 2 isolated holes. There's another pit, the B6 pit. You can see there's a undulating feature there, which to me suggests that there's a fault within that pit or something. There's a depression in it, and it's heading in a east to southeast direction. Leighton, you may want to point out that there's areas of alluvials, also alluvial gold from historic workings in the area that you're outlining now, which is significant, probably derived from weathering of what we call a saprolite, very similar to anything you see in South America. Suriname, Guyana, French Guiana, where I've been in these 3 countries, you see this kind of saprolitic gold that the artisanal miners mine, and was no different in the United States at that time.
I just want to go back this pit. I'll make a quick comment here, Laurie, to your point about historic alluvial. Sort of gap in blast hole data here represents a shallow pit that was mined starting in the 1850s. And off of the screen here to the right is Little Fort Creek, which is the eastern boundary of the Brewer, the 1,000 acre property. So then if we go back to this one, you can see this is a topographical high and it goes down, it slopes pretty steeply down to the east and southeast. And you see the B6 pit, and this is declining down through this feature. And right here where my cursor is that Little Fort Creek. And about right here in 1890 or so, a 40 stamp mill was built, and there was an underground tunnel that was built with rail tracks up here toward that historic pit. So this is just a little bit of historic context.
Thanks, Leighton. I was not aware of that, actually. So that bodes well. The old timers would not have done that without good reason. Right. So this is pretty classic drill core. Geologists who are looking at this would have said they've seen this in high sulfidation systems in a lot of the world. It's also very similar to core sitting above porphyry systems that I've seen in Ecuador, Chile, Andean Belt, the Pacific, Serbia. It's pretty classic hydrothermal textures, matrix supported in places with sulfide and elsewhere just clearly blasted and silicified, totally hydrothermally altered or metasomatized, as Chris would describe. And very exciting, but very typical, and endless meters of this in this drill core. We've got to highlight the VG, of course. I wouldn't put that under a rock. On the left side, we have gold on a fracture. That would be 30 to 40 micron at the least. And on the right side, another fracture may be associated with some copper mineralization. It's hard for me to pick that up, but clearly this is very important from in terms of metallurgy. In fact, it's on what I would call a pressure crack or stylolite, and I've seen that in orogenic deposits around the world as well. The gold just gets released of the sulfides and is subsequently reconstituted in fractures and pressure points. So getting back to this slide, Leighton, it's significant that we've just chosen two examples at random. Of course, we're not suggesting there's necessarily a TIMA or a TB below this, but certainly these are the kind of deposits that have a huge endowment and can have a big impact on a company. Starting with Timok, you could fit the actual Timok copper ore body entirely within the Brewer pit. Shows you how focused and high grade that particular upper 1.8 million ounce and 0.9 million ton copper zone is. And then of course below it at Timok, starting 800 meters to 2 kilometers, is this massive porphyry and very golden rich porphyry. An even bigger system, which company I founded, discovered in Java, is this TB. It's currently producing about 150, 175,000 ounces of gold a year from the oxide zone. The massive block cave porphyry potential at depth started at around 900 meters and extended to about 2 kilometers to date, contains 28 million ounces of gold and a very, very big inventory of copper in the lower zone. That's the 40-year mine life that is projected for Tujuh Bukit, and in Timok, ultimately a similar system will be exploited by block cave. So we're talking deep drilling. Significance is at Brewer. We believe that we're above the heat engine. We believe that we will ultimately do some holes to probe and test that hypothesis. So that is the big win for us in the future. It's the blue sky. But right now we've got to be focused on these plumes of hydrothermal breccia, which create the immediate resource. But no doubt, I think most geologists would agree that this system will have some kind of a porphyry at depth or off to one side. We're just not sure where. I guess this has brought us back to, what are we going to be doing in terms of next steps? And Leighton, if you want to address that first.
Sure. We do have funding to continue our 10,000 meter diamond drill program. We've only drilled less than 2,800 meters, but we also have a lot of data coming in. Laurie mentioned earlier, this here right now is just an absolute godsend in terms of using historic data to leverage our decisions going forward so we make smart ones. Our consulting geologist, Ashley Quigley, input 35,000 data points. One of the best tools we've had and have for vectoring and identifying where we're going to drill next. So we will be looking at doing more vertical drilling through the old backfill and below the former mine. But also, I think we're going to be doing some drilling outside of the former mine. We have 2,500 acres to explore. So we also want to make sure that we understand geochemically, geophysically, and geologically the entire higher footprint.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I should mention that historic work again on the topaz areas where there's a very strong visual association between topaz and gold to the northwest provide us with immediate satellite targets. Hard drilling, but very rewarding. And the entire system is not isolated. There are several other breccia bodies known historically that were looked at. So we know that this system is at least 3 to 4 kilometers in its extent with leached lithocap. And our job is to start from the known and work to the unknown.
Yeah, I go back to this cartoon, to your point, Laurie, really is a useful guide, I think, to what we've got here.
Good. Well, I mean, onward and upward. The that slide there you just put on there is an excellent slide because it speaks to the fact that there's plenty of gold.
This is a slide showing our RAB results. In the fall of 2020, we drilled 90 shallow holes, each about 18 meters. And we did report on this back in November. But here you can see the legend here. And there was at least anomalous gold in all of the holes. But you can see if you see yellow or red or pink, those are some higher grades. And this shows you the old pit right through it, south of it, and then along the same coincident line where we did a line of IP here. And then this is the most recent diamond drill hole with these recent diamond holes plotted along with that RAB. So you can see we've started with the known, as Laurie said, and we're now zooming out to the lesser known, but we're rigorously and aggressively explore right here where we've gotten some very good results with holes 4 and 5. They
are significant data points and very useful tool, given that there's a fair bit of oxide and sulfide waste around there, a great tool. This slide I've alluded to, the Jefferson project is something that we did some drilling a couple of years ago, and more of Haile style mineralization, if you will, hosted in sediments with hydrothermal alteration, different kind of alteration to what we see, or much less silicification, cooler mineralization, which frankly is unfinished work and needs to be addressed as we move forward.
That's right. That's our plan. Well, that does it, Laurie. I appreciate your time again, and we will continue the dialogue, and we'll be providing updates to our followers and our shareholders on our next steps. But we're very excited. And like Laurie said, I'm going to end it with this phrase: we have a tiger by the tail, and that's where you want to be in this business. So that's it. All for now.
Bye.